Assalamu alaikum students. This is Dr. Samina Qasim, your Human Resource Management course facilitator. Today, the topic that I'm going to discuss today is employee testing and selection. Once you review your applicant's resume, the next step is selecting the best candidates for the job. This usually means whittling down the applicant's pool by using the screening tools that we are going to cover in this chapter. Now, why careful selection is important? Nothing is more important than hiring the right employees. It is important for three main reasons. Number one, organizational performance. Number two, cost of recruiting and hiring. Number three, legal obligations and liability. Avoiding negligent hiring claims basically means taking reasonable steps to avoid hiring employees with criminal records or other problems who commit crimes or other acts for which the employer can be held liable. Now, what are the things that you should consider for avoiding negligent hiring? Avoiding negligent hiring claims. Careful scrutinize information on employment application. Get written authorization for reference checks and check references. Save all records and information about the applicant. Reject applicants for false statements or conviction record for offensive related to the job. Balance the applicant's privacy rights with others that need to know. Take immediate disciplinary action if problem arises. Now, basic testing concepts. A test is basically a sample of a person's behavior. Using a test or a selection tool assumes the tool is both reliable and valid. Few things illustrate evidence-based HR, the deliberate use of best available evidence in making decisions about human resource management practices you are focusing on, as do checking for reliability and validity. What is reliability? It describes the consistency of scores obtained by the same person when retested with the identical or alternate forms of the same test. That is, are test results stable over time? Validity. It indicates whether a test is measuring what it is supposed to be measuring. Does the test actually measure what it is intended to measure? Clear? Now, types of validity. Validity, as mentioned earlier, it indicates whether a test is measuring what it is supposed to be measuring. So in employment testing, there are two main ways to demonstrate a test validity. That is, one is criterion validity, other is content validity. Now let me explain you. This criterion validity means demonstrating those who do well on the test also do well on the job, and that those who do poorly on the job do poorly on the job. In psychological measurement, a predictor is the measurement that you are trying to relate to a criterion, such as performance on the job. Employer demonstrate the content validity of a test by showing that the test constitute a fair sample of the job content. The basic procedure here is to identify job tasks that are critical to performance and then randomly select a sample of those tasks to test. Now, these are the example of websites offering information on test or testing programs. Now, this table summarizes some important testing guidelines such as use tests as supplements, Validate the test, monitor your testing selection program, keep accurate records, use a certified psychologist, manage test conditions, revalidate periodically. Test takers' individual rights and security. Now, you see, test takers have right to privacy and feedback under the American Psychological Association, called APA, Standard for Educational and Psychological Tests. These guides psychologists but are not legally enforceable. Now, what is under the APA Standard for Educational and Psychological Test? Test takers have the following rights. First is the right to the confidentiality of test results, the right to informed consent regarding use of these results, the right to expect that only people qualified to interpret the scores will have access to them, or that sufficient information will accompany the scores to ensure their appropriate interpretation. The right to expect the test is fair for all. For example, no one taking it should have prior access to the questions or answers. Legal privacy issues. Defamation. Libeling or slandering of employees or former employees by an employer. Avoiding employees' defamation suit. Train supervisor regarding the importance of employee confidentiality. Adopt a need to know policy. Disclosure or disclose procedure impacting confidentiality of information to employees. How do employers use tests at work? Now, firm test applicants for basic skills, defined as the ability to read instructions, write reports, or do arithmetic adequate to perform common workplace tasks. Many others require employees to take job skills tests and require some form of psychological measurement. Employers don't use tests just to find good employees, but also to screen out bad ones. Now you see the short test in this figure 6-4, it is intended to find out how prone you might be to on-the-job accidents. Now computerized and online testing. Computerized or the online testing is increasingly replacing conventional paper and pencil and manual tests. Many firms have applicants take online test or offline computerized test, sometimes by phone, using touch tone keypad, sometimes online, to pre-screen applicants quickly prior to more in-depth interviews and background checks. You see, online tests include telephone pre-screening, offline test result test, offline computer test, virtual inbox test, online problem-solving test. Type of test includes specialized work sample test, numerical ability test, reading comprehension test, clerical comparing and rechecking or checking test. Type of test. What different tests measure? First is cognitive ability. Cognitive tests include tests of general reasoning ability, that is the intelligence, and tests of specific mental abilities like memory and inductive reasoning. Tests of motor and physical abilities measure motor abilities such as finger dexterity, manual dexterity, and reaction time. However, personality tests measure basic aspects of applicants' personality, such as introversion, stability, and motivation. Now, current achievement test basically measures what someone has learned. Most of the tests you take in school are achievement tests. They measure your job knowledge in areas like economics, marketing, or human resources. Clear? Now you see the test of mechanical comprehension in this figure. It tests applicants' understanding of basic mechanical principles. See? Now the big five. The big five trait. Industrial psychologists often focus on the big five personality dimensions, that is, extroversion, emotional stability, neuroticism, agreeableness, consciousness, and openness to experience. You have studied this all in your organizational behavior, so I expect that you know this all, right? Work samples and simulations. Now, with work sample, examinees are presented with situation representative of the job for which they are applying and are evaluated on their responses. Experts consider these simulations like the assessment center, which we have also discussed in the section to be test. However, they differ from most test form because they measure job performance directly. Okay, samples, management assessment center, video-based situational testing, miniature job training and evaluation. Background investigation and other selection methods. To avoid negligent hiring mistakes, employer must check the candidate's background thoroughly. Investigations and checks include reference checks, background employment checks, criminal records, driving records, credit checks. And why it is so important? It is because to verify the factual information provided by the applicants and to uncover damaging information. Background investigation and reference checks. Now, most employers check and verify the job applicant's background information and references. Commonly verified data include legal eligibility for employment in compliance with immigration laws, dates of prior employment, military service, that includes discharge status, education, identification, including date of birth and address to confirm identity, county criminal records, like current residence, last residence, motor vehicle residence, credit, licensing, verification, and reference checks, so many things. Limitations on background investigations and reference checks. You see, in practice, as most people instinctively know, giving someone a bad reference can drag you into a legal mess. A communication is defamatory if it says false or tends to harm reputation of another by lowering the person in the examination estimation of the community or by deterring other person from associating or dealing with him or her. Employees can sue employer for disclosing true but embarrassing private facts about the employee. In practice, many firms have a policy of not providing any information about former employees except for their dates of employment, last salary, and position titles. To avoid potential invasion of privacy issues, employers should obtain the applicant's written permission before checking into the applicant's background information, even if that information is publicly available. For example, published on social networking site. This is very important, right? Making background checks more useful. To obtain better information on an applicant's background, employers can follow these guidelines. Number one, include on the application form a statement for applicants to sign explicitly authorizing a background check. Number two, Use telephone references if possible. Be persistent in obtaining information. Compare the submitted resume to the application. Ask open-ended questions to elicit more information from references. Use references provided by the candidate as a source for other references. Using pre-employment information services. Now, you see, various federal and state laws govern how employers acquire and use applicants' and employees' background information. The Fair Credit Reporting Act is the main directive. Compliance with these laws essentially involves these four steps. Acquisition and use of background information include disclosure to and authorization by applicant employee. Number 2, employer certification to reporting agency. Number 3, providing the copies of reports to applicant employees. Number 4, notice of adverse action to applicant employee. The Polygraph and Honesty Testing. Employee Polygraph Protection Act of 1988. This law severely restricts the polygraph, or in other terms we call this a lie detector, and other mechanical or electrical devices that attempt to measure honesty or dishonesty for honesty. Then testing. Federal law do not prohibit paper or pencil test or other chemical testing as for the drugs. You see, this generally prohibits polygraph examination by all private employers unless the employer has suffered an economic loss or injury, the employee in question had access to the property, there is a reasonable prior suspicion, or the employee is told the details of the investigation as well as question to be asked on the polygraph test itself. However, private business exemptions are private security employees, employees with access to drugs, and ongoing economic loss or injury investigations. Honesty testing programs. What employers can't do. Anti-theft screening procedure. Ask blunt questions. Listen rather than talk. Do a credit check. Check all employment and personal references. Use paper and pencil honesty test and psychological test. I explained you this before. Test for the drugs. Establish a search and seizure policy and conduct searches. You see, this is the uptight personality test. From the Graphology review, the following samples show several uptight tendencies. We see independence, a critical, rather severe attitude, and an economy of feeling. Notice too how the words are separated by large spaces, indicating that the writer has a feeling of personal isolation. You see, you notice how the words are separated by large spaces. This indicates that the writer has a feeling of isolation. Okay. Physical examination includes why we conduct this, the reason for pre-employment medical examination. It includes basic reason is to verify that the applicant meets the physical requirement of the position, to discover any medical limitation to be taken into account in placing the applicant, to establish a record or a baseline of the applicant's health for future insurance or compensation claims. Very important thing, to reduce absenteeism and accidents, and to detect communicable disease that may be unknown to the applicant. Now, this is all from this chapter. If you have any query, you can ask me through email. Thank you so much, students.